Andreessen's comments. I'd just love to sort of get your reaction to them.
I think Microsoft and OpenAI have orchestrated the greatest hype campaign I have ever seen in technology, which is really saying something. I mean, what they have done to get the world to treat this technology as the next big thing is really, really impressive. But I do think some caution for investors is really appropriate. And I would put it this way. Generative AI has a very simple goal. It's designed to pass a Turing test, to create the illusion that you're dealing with a human being on the other side. In order to do that, it makes no attempt to be accurate. What it does is it focuses on being plausible. And in the real world business setting, there are very few instances where plausibility is more valuable than accuracy. And so the thing I would point out in this entire thing is that we have no independent verification of the numbers of users, of the amount Microsoft paid. What we have is a very carefully orchestrated campaign. It's working really, really well. They've got everybody focused on it. But I'm very worried about what the return on investment is going to be. It reminds me a lot of what SAP and Andersen Consulting did in the early 90s around enterprise resource planning, when they orchestrated a similar hype campaign, got the Fortune 500 to embrace this thing intensely. And most companies had massively negative ROI because the technology was, as in the case of generative AI, half-baked.
You don't think that it is improving at a rapid rate? And or I guess I hear you questioning perhaps this thesis that says there's going to be great productivity gains for enterprises across the board over the next few years as a result of their use of generative AI.
Well, David, let's focus on a couple of the core use cases. So CARP's talking about it in the military. We need to understand these things are not intelligent and they are not human. The notion that you're going to delegate important decisions of life or death, to an AI is irresponsible. That should not be happening. The technology may eventually get there, but it is not there today. We've seen this with self-driving cars. You literally have to have 1.5 human beings operating every self-driving car in order to keep the thing from running over everybody it sees. And so using it in warfare, right? And using it in warfare is just a terrible idea. And using it in business for productivity requires the assumption that it's going to do better than a human being. And if you look at it in coding, for example, which is one of the really promising cases, it's producing, high school level coding. And so we're essentially going to accumulate massive technology debt as you get tens of thousands and then tens of millions and then billions of lines of code that are taking the space that something much more efficient could be done. And so my point here is we want to separate a thing that has huge potential over a period of decades from what people are trying to buy today, which is something that is not nearly that good.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems to be advancing at a rapid rate. I can think about all these different sort of hurdles that we've heard about in the past that have been overcome quite quickly. Again, you don't seem to be a believer. You're talking decades. Others are talking, a handful of years until this thing advances to the point where it's no longer coding at a high school level, but at a fairly high level.
Well, let's wait and see. People are investing in it today, in today's product, as though it already does that. And so look, the rule of thumb with SAP in the early 90s was that being long SAP as a stock, but short its customers, that was one of the great arbitrages of all time. I suspect something similar is going to go on here. If you look at the companies who make the greatest commitment to AI today, these guys are going to be too early. And they're going to put stuff in there that does not work very well. And our economy is pretty concentrated. So in some industries, companies will get away with this because there's no competitor who can create an alternative product that works better. But I just think what we're going to wind up with is a lot of crap product all over the place. And if you think about it from an information system point of view, this will launder disinformation and it will increase the amount of spam and scams in the economy, because when you're creating a product that's just designed to fool people, the most valuable applications are ones where the goal is to fool people. And I just think from a policy point of view, the folks in Davos they're just missing the point. Interest rates are higher. I get that. It's harder for corporations to buy stock back. I get that. The economy, for many of these people, they haven't had competition for so long that their products are mature and they don't have anything to replace it. I get that. But the reality is, I just don't think AI today is going to be the answer to that question.
And it sounds like, Roger, you think that the AI of today is more susceptible to fraud and schemes, and that the positive outcomes from AI require more technology, better technology that could be decades away. So then if you're a regulator tuning in now, is there anything you can do about this at this point in time?
Absolutely.
To prevent it?
There are two things that need to go on right away. The first is to recognize that these companies are happy to pay NVIDIA for chips. They're happy to pay cloud service providers for cloud services, but they're unwilling to pay the people whose content is actually creating the value in the product. So the first thing you have to do is to enforce copyright law. But the second thing you have to do is to insist that these companies not be allowed to experiment on the whole population in an uncontrolled way. I mean, to me, I want to see really aggressive development of AI. I want to see big investments in this stuff. But I want to see it done in a way that doesn't either undermine our public health or our elections or our financial markets. And we'll just have to see if we get that opportunity.
Yeah, I guess let's end on that. I am curious what your thoughts are about this upcoming election season and the role that generative AI may play and/or play in terms of muddying the waters from a perspective of truth.
Well, David, the thing I've asked the Internet Archive to do is to create a product from the Wayback Machine for the day before ChatGPT was brought to market. Because I think we are going to suffer from this thing where generative AI is essentially, because it goes out there and looks at statistically the most frequently occurring next word for any word you have previously, as disinformation gets into the system, because of the way disinformation works, you're going to wind up laundering it, and increasingly the stuff you get as an answer to any query is going to be disinformation, and it's going to be really hard to make sense of the world. And that's going to happen very, very quickly because, again, there are no controls on the experiment. And this is not just about politics, it's about financial markets. It's about finding out what actually happened. And I look at this and I go, there's nothing wrong with generative AI that can't be solved by running the experiments in a careful scientific way. But this notion that this technology is the be-all and end-all for productivity, I find very unlikely.
Roger, always appreciate your time. We'll continue this conversation, I know. Thank you.
You bet. Take care.
So could